Greetings and welcome to Jefficho Films. Today we're going to talk about a zombie movie that was supposed to come out almost 2 years ago starring the Dr. Matt Smith. It did eventually get a limited theater release, but not near me. I saw it on Blu-ray. I feel like it was one step away from being a movie that would have done really well in theaters. And did I mention, this was on the blacklist, the 100 most sought after unproduced scripts that studios would bid over, and they still didn't get it into theaters. You're doing it wrong. So let's review Patient Zero. First off, this is a really good cast, maybe just not fully utilized. Matt Smith is one of my favorite doctors from Doctor Who and The Crown and the upcoming episode 9, even though right now he's denying it. We already heard he was cast for it. Natalie Dormer, Smoke Show from Game of Thrones and Hunger Games. Stanley Tucci from Jack the Giant Slayer and Hunger Games. John Bradley from American Satan and Game of Thrones. Clive Standen from Viking and Hammer of the Gods, which is a solid low-budget Viking movie where we learn dubstep works really well with medieval fight scenes. And Agyness Deyn, who I really didn't know, but I enjoyed her performance in this. And she was in Clash of the Titans, so if I'm going to give Julian Bashir props for being in that, I might as well give her some. So what's this zombie plot? If you selected global pandemic rabies, then you'd be correct. Add in a character that can talk to zombies, and we've got something original.
Now, I'm sure you're surprised to learn that I can communicate with you. I believe that qualifies as a question. So, you got a name? I see here that you had no identification when you were brought in. I'm gonna call you Joe.
Taking place in a facility hosting survivors and cots, a small medical lab, and a research facility studying the infected along with a military presence. Matt Smith plays Morgan, and he has bad dreams, which is basically exposition of his life beforehand with his lovely wife Janet. We learn that they got attacked and they both got bit. Where he didn't get turned into a zombie, he actually gained the ability to communicate with the infected. Janet, however, did get turned, but using his blood, he and Dormer's character Dr. Gina Rose developed a serum to help control the aggressive natures of the disease. It kinda barely works. Morgan interviews the infected, attempting to locate Patient Zero. They seem to have locked the first occurrence down to Minnesota. Guys, it happened in a research lab with monkeys. It always happens in a research lab with monkeys. Scooter, his research assistant and best friend, even makes a monkey sex joke, so...
You're a sick fucker, Scooter. I like it.
You tell that to the guy who contracted HIV by fucking that rhesus monkey.
That was never proven.
Because what self-respecting monkey is gonna admit to that kind of shit?
Is everything a joke to you?
Whenever possible.
Scooter's also always talking about his son, and it's not till later after he dies we see Morgan lighted a candle for the son, who we presume is dead. Knox is in charge of base security, and he really shouldn't be. He's one step away from being a major creeper, and he really doesn't seem to understand what they're doing there and his whole orders, and he's kind of against it all. Which I guess kind of makes sense with all the stress of everything going on in the world, but he's probably not the one I'd have in charge. Gina and Morgan have awkward and crappy, no pun intended, bathroom sex, just to show that they have more than a professional relationship. Oh yeah, and she's pregnant. Somehow Tucci, who's one of the infected, smuggles himself into the morgue. After killing a few people, he surrenders himself to Morgan. They see he's different than the other infected. Music doesn't bother him, he even smokes a cigarette. And although no one but Morgan understands him, he's super well spoken compared to the other ones that just kind of grunt out their words.
Just an observation.
Broad observation that doesn't take individuality into account.
Oh, excuse me. So each infected is different.
Yes, well, why wouldn't we be? Each uninfected is different. Look at you.
We learn he was a professor and that he doesn't want to be cured despite not being proud of savagely murdering his wife and child. He feels that they're more evolved life now, that they're not holding back their anger and rage, and they can let all that out and they feel no real consequences. Well, other than bite and kill people, I don't see much contribution, so I think his argument isn't winning. It is, however, buying time for them, as he has installed a tracking device in one of the Minnesota infected, which is leading an army there as they speak. The base gets overrun and we see how our characters handle the pressure and the threat of death. Morgan runs to save his wife, who doesn't want to go with him because she knows what she's capable of, but she reluctantly goes anyway. Gina escapes with Knox, who shoots at General to slow down the infected. It was odd because I think there was time for the General to make it to the elevator. Gina then shoots Knox because she needs to get to her research. This also felt kind of out of place because there was really no need for him to die. Does no one have a conscience? Gina meets up with Morgan and his wife seems to know that Gina's pregnant with his child. There should have been some tension there, but there wasn't.
Jean, listen to me.
She could turn at any time.
No, she won't. The injections are working. You said so yourself. Put the goddamn gun down.
But not lasting.
Please, Gina. I'm not leaving without her. Please, do this for me.
Eventually, Tucci escapes and battles the three of them. He tells Morgan that he is their patient zero, and he has to kill them so that he doesn't halt the spread of the infected. Morgan does a cool ram him into a spike thing where the piece goes through Tucci and then into him, but it wasn't like it was in his shoulder where it's like a bullet wound in a movie and you can just walk that shit off. It looked like it went through his chest and it was really thick. He probably should have died after. But with the aid of his wife staying behind to fight them so they could get away, they somehow make it to his bike, where they ride off and somehow get past the infected, who should have been able to take him out pretty easy. Now before I pick some of these things apart, I will say this is not a bad movie. It had a lot of potential, and I just feel it was the execution that wasn't there. Now I knew some of the things about the characters, but not enough to understand their choices, and their choices shaped the movie. The dynamic between him and Gina wasn't well defined, as he had his wife, and it was interesting that he held on to her because although infected, she wasn't gone. He did suddenly seem more interested in Gina when he found out about the child, like it was more important at this point, but it was hard to care about his goals because he was split between two women. They never went any further with the child, but the baby essentially could be the key. His genetic markers, along with the infected being in him but not altering him like the others, could affect the baby into holding the cure within its blood. I mean, when his father was bit, he didn't get turned, he gained the ability to understand them, so that's how the science would work for me, but they don't even mention it. Just a lot of assumptions and leaps of faith must be taken. I love Tucci in this. His backstory and lack of empathy was great, but he lost some of his villainous near the end. He definitely fell a bit flat. Like, he was clearly their leader, but why? I mean, he was in control, but when he saw his family, he wasn't. Too much left unexplained, and characters not fully whole left me feeling there was something missing. And how do you kill the infected? I mean, some were shot and died, and then others who were dead just came back. I mean, you need to establish your rules of your zombie movie. Overall, this was a perfectly watchable movie. I enjoyed Tucci's origin story of how he became the infected. It was done at this college campus, and it felt fresh. And how many zombie movies have we seen? How's it still feeling fresh? I don't know. They managed to do it.
I tore my wife's limbs from her torso like wings from a butterfly. She begged me to stop and cried out my name, but I couldn't until I ripped out her heart.
I really think this would have benefited from being a television series. I mean, you could elaborate on the characters more, what they were doing before, how they got there, constantly have all these flashbacks explaining who they are and the decisions that they make. I mean, Tucci's story alone was pretty interesting. I want to see more of that. And then the baby, how that could lead into the future. And maybe actually carrying the zombies during the television series. You never get to see those kind of things. Well, as I said, watchable movie, so, give it a shot. And as always, thanks for watching.